I had heard several more gunshots, and again, making inferences, the defendant was the only one with a large caliber rifle. I'd seen an individual jump over the defendant, and then the defendant heard 2 shots, and then from there I saw another individual use his skateboard to hit the defendant, or hold the defendant. Either way, the individual had made contact with the defendant with his skateboard, and then from there I heard another shot, and then as we can see in this still, an individual, well, yeah.
Okay. I want to back up for a second, Mr. Grosskreutz, because we have other video that shows you pulling your gun out before those shots are fired. So do you remember specifically, were you intending, when you pulled your gun out, were you intending to use it?
If I had to. I didn't draw my firearm with express intent of using it, but also being ready if I had to use it.
Let's continue the video for a little bit, and I'm going to pause here. Let's pause right there. We've already seen this video. There's an individual on the left who had been shot at twice by the defendant. Then the defendant is there on the ground, and there's another individual between the defendant and you, Anthony Huber, who has been shot in the chest at this point. And that individual to the right of Mr. Huber that's sort of crouched over, that's you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you witness the defendant fire 2 shots at that man on the left?
I did.
Did you witness him fire a shot into Mr. Huber's chest?
I did.
So when you come upon the defendant at this point, do you recall what you were holding in your hands?
I do.
What were you holding?
In my right hand, I had my Glock pistol, and in my left hand, I had my cell phone.
What was going through your mind at this particular moment?
That I was going to die.
Let's continue the video for just a second, please. Pause. There's a time in this video when you appear to hold your hands up. Do you know about that? Do you recall that?
I do.
Why did you do that?
After Anthony Huber was shot, you can see in the video I'm not too far behind him. And the defendant had, after murdering Anthony Huber...
The objection is sustained. That whether the death of Anthony Huber was caused by murder or not is for you jurors to decide and not for the witness. So please keep that in mind. That people, when they're in the court and they're testifying, they can be affected by their emotions, sometimes by their jobs, and they will, for someone who comes into a physician, for example, with a gunshot wound, may be identified as a victim, and that's the language that they speak in the hospital because the person comes in with a gunshot wound. Here in the court, where the issue is yet to be determined whether someone's a victim or not, and it's to be based on the evidence presented in court, and it's a decision to be made by you jurors, not by a witness, not by the judge, not by the prosecutor or the defense attorney. So I'm going to ask you to strike the comment, which was this witness's view of the subject, and because it carries no weight. It's for you folks to decide. Any question about that? Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So you had just seen Mr. Huber get shot.
Correct.
And so what was going on in your mind?
I was very close to the defendant, and I thought there was a high likelihood that I would be shot myself.
Can we back up and play 10 seconds? Go back 10 seconds, please. Please continue. Pause. At this point in the video, is the defendant pointing his AR-15 at you?
Yes, he is.
And you have your hands raised in the air at this point?
I do.
Continue the video, please. Pause. Did you see the defendant do anything with his gun after you put your hands up?
I did.
What did you see him do?
It's an action that's typically referred to as re-racking a firearm. So after the defendant had pointed his rifle at me and put my hands up, and then the defendant, like I said, did this motion, what's called re-racking, and that's essentially where you take the slide, which on a AR-15 like that would be on the top, and you pull back, and what that does is, depending on if there was already a bullet or a round in the chamber, which would mean it would be ready to fire, as you can put in a magazine, where the bullets are held, and the firearm won't be able to fire. But as soon as you then pull the slide back, like on a pistol or on an AR-15 on the top, that then either loads the rifle or the firearm for it to be ready to fire, or if there was already a round previously in the chamber, that then ejects that round or casing, if that round had been spent, and then reloads the next bullet into the chamber or the barrel.
So after you raised your hands like this, you saw the defendant re-rack the weapon?
Correct.
What did you think was going to happen?
In my experiences and in my inference in that moment, after the defendant had pointed his weapon at me and I had put my hands in the air, re-racking the weapon in my mind meant that the defendant pulled the trigger while my hands were in the air, but the gun didn't fire. So then by re-racking the weapon, I inferred that the defendant wasn't accepting my surrender.
Did you feel that he was going to point the gun and shoot at you again?
Yes.
What did you do then?
So after the defendant had re-racked his weapon with the rifle still aimed at me, in that moment, I felt that I had to do something to try and prevent myself from being killed or being shot or killed. And so I decided that the best course of action would be to close the distance between the defendant and I, and then from there, I don't know. I mean, if it meant trying what Anthony had just tried, wrestling the gun, detaining the defendants, I don't know, because I never had an opportunity. I do know, though, I was never trying to kill the defendant. That was never something that I was trying to do. In that moment, I was trying to preserve my own life. But doing so while also taking the life of another is not something that I'm capable or comfortable in doing. That goes against almost a lifelong ethical code that I've lived by in regards to medicine.